serious? When was a time you legitimately thought you were going to die? Summer of 2015. After I had a 6-hour surgery to remove a tumor. When I woke up and they took the mask off of me, I was in so much pain and felt like I couldn't breathe. Somebody pulled a revolver on me while at a party. Turns out it was one of those decommissioned ones with a cemented barrel and cylinder. But I didn't know at the time and it was ducking scary. I was on vacation this past summer. Was staying at a friend's house. When I started to notice my chest feeling tight, I started to get a fever and feel sick. I threw up and the feeling in my chest started to expand. It felt like it was going to explode. Like a balloon being inflated inside me. I couldn't stand it. I literally felt like at any moment my heart would give out or my chest would explode. Went to the emergency. Turns out I had a really bad gallbladder attack. But on the drive to the hospital I was telling my wife how much I love her lol and that if she remarries don't let it be anyone we currently know hahaha. I was really sick when I was 12. Missed a whole semester of school. I was throwing up every day and had no energy. Doctors couldn't figure it out. I test after test. Visited specialist after specialist and nothing. All we did know is my liver wasn't functioning. I was pretty jaundiced. I was pretty sure I would die before we knew what was wrong. It's hard to explain but I came to terms with it. Like I was more comfortable with death as a concept when I was 12 than I am now at 25. Turns out it was my gallbladder. They had checked it for gallstones early on but that wasn't the issue. My particular malfunction didn't show up on an ultrasound. The bile duct into my stomach didn't form correctly from birth and it was hindering complete bile drainage leading to sepsis in my gallbladder liver. On surgery and 2 weeks bed rest and I was back to normal. Edit. Well golly. To answer the most common questions, I got referred to a pediatric gastroenterologist who decided to order the HEDA scan you are all referencing. The barium milkshake thing you have to drink is absolutely disgusting. That indeed caught it. Why my local physicians didn't order one is beyond me. I am not a doctor and was 12. I do know that one doctor didn't even want an ultrasound for gallstones because I was too young to have gallstones. The 5th of October 2019 rear-ended by a dump truck. In a coma for 42 days and am now paralyzed. Hit a stopped car going over 65 miles per hour. Spent 2 years in a wheelchair. 6 months of that was learning to walk again. Honestly thought I was going to die in the seconds before impact. I can still clearly see the people in the other car. The other traffic around us. Car was stopped to turn on a highway with no middle turning lane. I was the only one injured though. And I'm still sort of grateful for that because I swear there was a kid in the backseat of the other car. I wasn't the driver. Front seat passenger of a reckless driver. When I had migraine with aura for the first time, I didn't even know this was a thing. But it started with the worst migraine I ever had followed by me losing my sight and becoming dizzy and feeling sick. I thought this was it. I told my sister that I thought I was gonna die. She told me she has those migraines too. Brought me a pill specifically for these migraines and told me to sleep. She stayed with me until I woke up just to be sure. Scary as hell. When I was taken hostage in Iraq and held for over 2.5 years, the 4 other people captured with me were killed. I was the only one who made it out alive. I did an AMA about it some years ago. My 3rd round with double pneumonia. Put into isolation on round-the-clock oxygen. There's just something about such severe oxygen deprivation that you get dizzy and hack up a lung just crossing a room to pick up a book that makes you certain the end is coming. Very recently I had some kind of super fast virus or illness. Not sure what it was but it basically started off with me feeling an incredible sense of impending doom. Which I know is a sign for panic attacks. But I don't get panic attacks. And that feeling lasted until I started getting cold. Usually I'm way too warm. But this time I had to bundle up. That didn't work and even getting into bed didn't help. I started shivering so hard my muscles began to tighten and it was so painful I had to jump into the shower to stop it. But before I could get in I started getting lightheaded and had to lie down on the floor. It was like everything was spinning. And then I had the urge to eat and puke at the same time. Not being able to think clearly I get into the tub in an attempt to do both just in case. At that moment I couldn't stand or coordinate properly. Shivering, lightheaded, About to eat and puke. I thought to myself I must be about to die and this is how I'll be found. I ended puking first. Felt better enough to eat in proper place and then showered to stop the shivering. After all of that it was like nothing happened and I was better again. I woke up in the morning to get ready for work. Bent to tie my shoe. And when I stood back up the sight in my right eye was entirely gone. I did the usual thing of blinking and shaking my head a little. Thinking maybe blood rushed to my head weird or whatever. But it wouldn't come back. I tried to explain to my partner that I was in trouble. But when I spoke the wrong words kept coming out. I don't remember exactly what I said. But I definitely said tree instead of hospital at one point. I figured I was having a stroke or an aneurysm had ruptured. Or something brain tumory. Who knows? Whatever the case, I spent the entire ride to the hospital crying and telling my partner over and over that I loved him. It felt like I couldn't say it enough. Turns out I was preparing for my first migraine, cluster headaches. I do not recommend them. And the migraine aura I get is blindness and aphasia because I'm a lucky girl like that, I guess. Back in July I was riding my motorcycle and was turning into my driveway. A girl came from behind me around a sharp turn and T-boned me. She was going at least 60 miles per hour up until a couple seconds before impact when she hit her brakes. She hit me because she was either texting or d-ing around with something in her car. Either way she wasn't paying attention. I remember hearing tires screeching and seeing the car half a second before impact, then everything went black. I broke the windshield with my head, broke the mirror with my hip, then landed face first on the road. I do remember being scared because I wasn't sure if there were more cars, so adrenaline kicked in and I caught myself with my hands and knees and pushed myself to my feet to run off the road. That's where I regained my vision. The bike was totaled, but thanks to my helmet and pure rage at being hit I managed to literally walk away with only a concussion, nasty bruises, and a deep bone bruise on my left foot. No broken bones at all. It's been 8 months and I'm still recovering from the concussion. My toe barely hurts, and the leg that took the impact has a dent in the muscle, but other than that I'm fine. If I wouldn't have been wearing a helmet then I have no doubt that I would be dead now. Wear your damn helmets, kids. Edit. That last wear should be wear. It's weird I misspelled that. It's like I got a concussion recently, haha. When I had a panic attack and I thought it was a heart attack. Edit. Thanks for the award. It's my first ever. Didn't think my epic poop story and general dumbassery would get so popular. So this is funny but also serious and disgusting, so I hope you have a strong stomach. I was sick. Pooping my brains out. Intense cramps. Blood. Vomit, migraines for days. It got to the point I was eating water. Crystal. Clear. Water. I thought I was poisoned somehow. Severely dehydrated as every fluid I drank just went through me like a funnel or came back up minutes later. I stuck to water because it wasn't as gross as curdled milk. I lived on the toilet. One day I was sitting there sick as all hell, my new normal or so I thought. I start physically heating up. Heart palpitations. Turned pale, fainted. Fell off the toilet still eating and vomiting. Fortunately I fell just right so I didn't choke on my own vomit. When I came to, still feeling faint, I take in my surroundings. They're on the floor. There's pink butt water on my wall, laundry basket, and on half the floor seeping under me. There's vomit. Basically just stomach acid and water at this point. On the other half of my floor and all over half my head. I was home alone, my parents were working and my brother was asleep, and he sleeps hard. A bomb could go off and he wouldn't know. Anyways, fluids just don't stop coming. I can't feel my legs. And I have no idea where my phone is, so I start shouting in between dry heaves and, well, Poseidon crawling out of my throat. Luckily my neighbors heard me and called an ambulance. That ride was hell for every single one of us. My poor EMTs had to go home, shower, and I'm sure get tested for whatever it was I had, all while hoping they weren't gonna die. Fast forward to hospital, they give me meds to stop stomach spasms and anti-nausea medications along with pain meds for my acid-ridden esophagus and sore muscles. After all the tests, turns out I had the flu. Not the scary part, and no electrolytes. Cue back to the only having water after a point, on top of being severely dehydrated. The blood was just my pissed off colon. Lack of electrolytes can do some pretty scary, pun intended. Edited for spelling and spacing. Caught norovirus a few years ago. I didn't realize how bad it could be before it struck. No fluids would stay in for more than a few seconds. I ended up really dehydrated almost overnight. Like if you pushed on my skin it would stay sunk. I couldn't move or any muscles would full cramp. Legs, jaw, arms, abs, all of them. I didn't think I would survive. At the very least thought my heart would cramp. But I got over it after 5 or 6 days. I can totally see how it kills old people though. If I was any less averagely healthy for an adult male dad, I'm sure I'd be dead. This happened about 4-5 months ago. I was home alone eating steak tip kebabs for dinner. My wife was at work and due home in about an hour. I choked on one of the pieces of steak. Chew thoroughly, people. At first I thought I just needed to swallow harder. Bad idea, as now it was firmly lodged in my throat. I tried coughing it up, punching myself in the stomach, and pulling it out with my hand. None of which helped. I then ran over to the kitchen and tried to wash it down with some water. The water just sat in a pool in my mouth. My throat was completely blocked. At this point I contemplated calling 911, but I knew I'd be long dead before they'd arrive. The thought of my wife, we just celebrated our first anniversary and recently decided to start trying to conceive. Coming home to find my dead body was by far the scariest part. I remember looking at my cats, but they just stared at me, confused at my odd behavior. Eventually I reached what felt like my whole hand down my throat and pulled a chunk of the obstruction out. This loosened it enough to let me cough out the remainder. I was so close to passing out. Vomit everywhere. Total time in throat around 90 seconds. I couldn't talk for a day due to the physical trauma on my throat. Drove myself to the hospital. Cried in front of my wife when I saw her. The next few days were surreal. It was like I was living in an alternate timeline. I don't find choking gags in movies TV amusing anymore. Still have mild PTSD about it. Car accident few months prior. Hit a stationary car on the highway going over 100 km/h. Wheels locked up due to slippery road. Thought it was over for me within that few seconds. But miraculously both me and the other person got out with minor injuries. Edit. Changed brake failed to wheels locked up due to road was wet. Just for clarification, my bad. One time I woke up in the middle of the night with a stomach ache. So I went in the bathroom and shat wildly for a while. Then I went into a cold sweat and my hearing and vision started to blur and muffle. I called for my mom but I couldn't quite hear myself. Then everything went black and I couldn't really hear anything but I was still awake, so that wasn't cool. Then my mom, she heard me, as I did successfully yell for her, gave me a bowl and I threw up a completely clear liquid with the appearance and viscosity of corn syrup. This all happened over the course of like 30 minutes and I woke up fine that morning. When it was happening I thought I was gonna die, and afterward I assumed it was food poisoning or something. Apparently most of what I just described is not consistent with food poisoning though. Cheers. A couple friends and I were driving home from a birthday party and we got rear-ended by a drunk driver who was going about 120. On impact all of the windows exploded and the tires caved inwards and we were going about 70, so there was a sort of slingshot effect that made us pick up some speed. We were just careening down the freeway with zero control. The car swerved around a bunch, almost hits another car and a pole and eventually rolled into an area just right of the shoulder. Luckily it ended up back upright on the tires and somehow ended up facing the complete opposite direction we were initially going. We thought our friend in the backseat was dead but she was just unconscious and ended up having some pretty bad whiplash. My other friend and I were basically unharmed except for some cuts and bruises and just overall body ache for a little bit. This was in 2007 and I still think about pretty frequently. We all probably should have died for sure. I took an edible before a flight from Portland to San Francisco. I proceed to get very, very high both metaphorically and literally. The plane begins its descent and as it does this it seems to take a steeper angle than usual and I notice the engine seemingly turn off or stop making as much noise. In my paranoid stoned mind I become convinced that the engines have failed and we are going to crash. I begin composing my last texts to send out to my family and friends, saving them all as drafts. And then like 20 minutes later I notice that none of the flight attendants are worried at all and still smiling and joking. This is when I realize that the plane was not in fact crashing and I'm just an idiot. Woke up immediately wide awake in the middle of the night without moving and the hair standing up on the back of my neck because my now ex-wife was standing in our bedroom holding a large kitchen knife and staring at my feet. She had had a schizophrenic break a few months earlier and had started referring to me as the enemy. I laid there without moving. She stood there for over an hour. Have no idea how long she was there before I woke up. Anyway, she leaves the room and comes back without a knife. Gets into bed and cuddles in little spoon style like she made a decision. Then she made me waffles for breakfast. Best believe I put on my best oh wow, amazing wife. These waffles are yum voice. As a child I would go bodyboarding at the beach, but only on our summer vacations. Being the excited child I would swim for hours. And one of those times, I got super worn out from the surf and sun. I swam out to catch a wave and was sitting there waiting for a good one. I laid down. I shut my eyes. Even though it must have been only a few minutes, though it seemed longer, I drifted far from the beach, way past where waves broke. To my child mind, it seemed more than a football field, but I'm sure it was not that bad. Nevertheless, I couldn't swim well enough to be out there alone. Thus, I promptly paddled in, scared as all get out. If I had fallen any more asleep, where would I have ended up? But this is the killer. Less than 10 miles up the coast there was a shark attack hours earlier. I also wonder if I would have been in one piece when I woke up. We had a lockdown at my school. Teacher didn't know what was going on. We heard a loud series of banging sounds as we huddled in the corner, and we all started texting our friends and family goodbye. I remember my mom sending me photos of our cat to try and help me stay calm. I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for her. I really thought I was going to die. As it turned out there was no real threat. It was a stupid prank. I don't know what the banging sound was, but it was probably chairs moving. Kinda embarrassing, but was camping with some friends. Poured my heart out to a girl. Got gently turned down. Then saw her making out with another guy. Everyone else was drinking and having a good time and I felt like I didn't even exist. My buddy had given me his Bowie knife when he started drinking, as I was the only one who wasn't gonna drink. He felt it was safest in my hands. All I could think of was to plunge that knife into my arm and carve myself up. I had been battling depression and suicidal thoughts for a while, and that night it all came to a head. That night I had the opportunity. I could have walked away from the group without being noticed. Walked into the woods and done it. I had a big sharp knife. It would have been easy. I thought about it for a good while and finally decided I was gonna do it. I started to walk towards the woods, hand on the handle, when one of my friends called my name and asked where I was going. I stopped right where I was and tried to come up with an answer. Said I was gonna take a piss and that I'd be right back. He said, okay man, don't get lost. I went a little further, long enough to pretend I'd peed, and made my way back. My friend with the knife offered me a shot of Jack Daniels, which I accepted and finished with 2 cans of Coke. Afterwards I asked if I could store his knife in his truck because now that I'd had alcohol I didn't feel comfortable with the knife. Truth was, having that friend notice me walk away made me decide I didn't want to die after all. But if I had that knife I might try again. I don't like to think what would have happened had my friend not seen me. Edit. I don't edit my comments a whole lot, but seriously, the responses to this have been wonderful, and I just wanted to say it really means a lot to know that there are random strangers on the internet who wouldn't know me if they saw me, but they've taken the time out of their day to write something and wish me well. There are some wonderful people here and you have all helped boost my faith in humanity. Not because you reached out to me, but because you reached out at all. I want to say that if my story touched you, or you feel in any way close to how I felt, please know that you aren't alone and that there are plenty of good people who would be willing to help you. There are all kinds of resources available. Please don't go through this alone. I wish everyone who sees this all the very best, and I give you all my love. I mean, whether I died and my consciousness continued in a parallel reality is up for debate, but I smashed into a concrete divider trying to get to an off-ramp 60 miles per hour in traffic. Things went completely black for forever it seemed, but was probably closer to 5 meters. 3 years ago, in 7th grade, I loved orchestra, so I would always rush to it to set up and tune. I get there and right as I walk in, bam. Lockdown is called. I thought it was real cause all lockdown because drills before had been in class, in elementary school. So I hid behind this massive letter holder thing that is about a foot wide that's next to the door. And I sit there. Then later I hear, through the walls, "You check that hall?" "No, I'll check this hall." "You check that one." There's a music hall that splits off from main one to the gym and workshop. And I thought, they're going to find me and kill me. I didn't know how to lock the orchestra doors. And then knock knock knock, police. Open up. I start reaching for a stand to throw at them. Door opens, hello? And he walks into the middle of the room and it's actually a policeman. "Anyone here?" he says. Then I finally get up and make my presence known. Turns out it was a drill and that all the other students went into the band teacher's office. He basically called them from his door, then barricaded it with stands. That's my story. Either when I was moments away from drowning at 9 years old, I'd gotten to the stage of acceptance and overwhelming love and compassion. I accepted my fate, wished my family well and was ready to embrace death. Next thing I knew I was hacking up water at the side of the pool. No one helped me. No one got me out and I don't remember how I got there. Or the day I discovered I have a severe allergy to codeine. Took some cocodamol for a headache that day and by my first lesson in school I couldn't breathe. Felt like my body was shutting down internally. The day after my sociopath father threatened to commit a school shooting at my high school if I tried to keep my mom away from him. Edit. Thank you for all the love and support. Reddit. I don't do drugs but years ago my pothead cousin convinced me to try some really potent bud brownies. I love brownies so when he handed them to me I ate the whole thing. When he turned around and asked what happened to the brownies and the look on his face when I told him I ate it all I knew I was screwed, lol. I spent the next few hours going in and out of consciousness and every time I woke up I'd either be throwing up or begging my cousin to take me to the ER. He was so high that all he did was cycle between moments of laughing at me, pantomiming playing sports, and checking if I was dead. I know now that I probably wasn't close to death but I 100% felt like I was. Edit. Well, first gold. Thank you to whoever that was. I'll make sure to let my cousin know his brownies didn't go to waste. I got left in a hot tub as a kid and the jets pushed me towards the center where I couldn't stand up. All I remember thinking was someone's gonna have to do CPR on me and that's gonna be really gross. My godfather noticed me and yanked me out of there while my mom was yelling at everyone asking who left me unattended in the hot tub. It was her. I have posted this before but it was still pretty scary. I rode a really twisty roller coaster with my wife and the seatbelt didn't lock or let loose. I get on the coaster and sit with my wife. We hit the first little set of hills and my upper torso is flailing around like a tube that the air blows into at a used car lot. My wife is yelling and mad at me thinking I am doing it to be funny but realizes that something went wrong. I hook my boots under the seat in front of me. We are both sweaty because it is hot. I am trying to hook one of my arms on the lap bar. Thank God my wife has strong hands. She has played softball since she was 8 and played in college. She is freaking out trying to hold me in with the right arm. She pulled my watch off of my wrist gripping my arm and hand. I am worried that I am going to get brained on one of the tunnels. Things slowed down. I had a bunch of images flash in my head. This is how I am going to die. My wife grasping my sweaty arm yelling my name and I think she was yelling no over and over. At least I had a good run. I got married and have 2 great kids. They will be rich from the settlement of my death from being decapitated in one of their tunnels. We hit the end and I finally get to tell her that there was a malfunction and it wasn't me being the fun guy. I realize my watch is gone and she is pretty shaken from the whole thing. We get the watch and get out. She decided that no more coaster the rest of the day for me. During childbirth with my second, it was so much different that time around and I literally thought I would die from the pain. Which is weird because the first time around, I was fine and didn't feel that way at all. Once when I was probably 5 or 6, my family was at an amusement park. I went on a roller coaster with my mom. Since I was way too small to ride alone but I was just barely tall enough to ride at all. This was one of those older coasters, made of mostly wood, and the security was not great. Well, on this roller coaster ride, there were corkscrews. During the first loop around, I started to slide out of my seat. The safety strap was not properly fastened, and I was very small, so as we continued to loop I slid further and further out of my seat. I assume at first my mom thought I was yelling from the thrill, until she looked over and barely caught me before I flew off the ride. She had to hold on to me while the ride continued for another minute or so, before stopping. I was sobbing. My mom was borderline manic, and since we were in the frontmost seat, everyone behind us immediately got out and rushed forward to make sure we were okay. That's the oldest memory I have, and it's not a great one. I think our whole family, 7 of us, got season passes for free after that, because we went suspiciously often after that. I got hit by a car and lost consciousness for a few seconds. I remember the moment I saw the car, the moment I got hit, and had 1,000 thoughts going through my head, like in a dream. And then there I am in the middle of the road. I woke up and ran to the side of it as fast as I could. Little did I know I was running with a broken leg. When I was in high school, I ate a couple hits of acid and went body surfing while there was a hurricane off the coast. One wave would crash into me, and as soon as I could recover from it and get my head above water, there goes another wave sending me tumbling around in circles underwater. Then there was the riptide to contend with. The last thing I remember was getting sucked out to sea and the lights from the beach getting further and further away. I have no idea how I made it back to the beach, but when I woke up, every muscle in my arms and legs felt like they were on fire, and I was puking up what felt like 2 gallons of water. In retrospect, I think body surfing while tripping balls in a hurricane was a bad idea. In college, my roommate decided to wake me up from a nap by putting an Adderall in my mouth because he wanted me to be up to party for the night. I took it and realized that it felt amazing. He gave me a couple more over the next few weeks, and it helped me a lot to keep up and get all of my assistants done. Despite his generosity though, he was a complete cunt. The biggest slob I ever met. Constantly stole everything that he could from me. Kicked me out when he had girls over, and everything else you could imagine. So just before we went on Thanksgiving break, I decided to get back at him by stealing some of his Adderall to use at home. During break I was stupid though and ended up staying awake with them for around 4 days straight. The last night my heart started going crazy from it. Felt like a panic attack, but a lot more painful, like my heart was a jackhammer. It took a while, but I managed to force myself to sleep and I never touched them again. I had an emotional trauma-induced seizure. Basically your brain stops and reboots. I had this feeling of fading into a warmth. I saw a warm yellow light at first, but it all faded into a blackness. I remember thinking, I don't know what's happening, but I think I'm about to die. I had a moment of reflection as I fell. I felt like I was being held by something calm telling me it may just be my time. I was 14 when I died, but only for 91 seconds though, cause like most things in life, I sucked at suicide too. About 2 weeks ago, I started having strange pains in my chest. At first, it seemed to originate from my heart. Of course, I overreacted and believed it to be a dangerous issue with my heart. I'd seriously accepted that I might not have seen the next day. Turns out, however, that I had a hole in my lung that was leaking air into my chest cavity, which was causing the pain. Not to understate the seriousness of having a hole in one's lung, but I was glad that it wasn't anything immediately life-threatening.